Welcome to the University Online Learning course on this fifth night of June 2018. So we're going to begin with today's class session, which is going to be giving some elaboration on the surah called Al-Asr. And I entitled this one Lost and Turned Out. Because Al-Asr is speaking to a situation among human beings that produces tremendous amounts of loss, as well as producing a situation where human beings cannot see their way adequately, and therefore human beings come into a situation where they find themselves lost. So Asr is a reference to loss as well as being lost. And you can hear in those two English words that there is definitely a linguistic connection. And people usually experience loss when they're in the dark, when they can't see, when they can't really navigate the way. You know, you're more likely to lose things when you can't see your way. You know, when you're lost and don't know where you are, don't know the way out of where you are to get to a place that you do know where you are, all of those things are wrapped up in this whole concept of asr. And just to say the word asr, you have to produce a straining movement in the back of the throat because of the letter Ain. And all of you who are learners in the University Online Learning course, you're already familiar through the book Nunetics in terms of what the letter Ain represents. It represents the straining on the vision primarily, straining to see, straining to stay awake, you know, just overall strain that produces a wetness in the eye. Whether that the wetness manifests as tears of pain because of the strain related to some endeavor, or whether we're talking about the tears related to joy, you know, and the happiness that can also produce an overflow of tears, whether we're talking about the straining that we do in the gymnasium that produces the water called a sweat from the sweat glands, or whether we're talking about the straining necessary in the old country, as people used to do when they were to send their bucket down into the well to bring up water, but there was a straining on the muscles in order to do so because those buckets could be very, very heavy once filled with water. So Ain is talking about a situation of strain that is designed to produce moisture. And I'm giving it to you like that in order for you to understand the connections between these symbols that we're presenting to you, such as water, and how it relates to something in the human nature that is being addressed by God in the Quran. And these concepts have also been addressed in previous scriptures, especially the Bible and the Torah, or the Old Testament and the New Testament, as they're called. Allah has placed no difficult ideas in this particular surah. Any child can understand the concepts. This surah actually redefines success and failure according to Allah's parameters and the paradigms, and not by the world's fabricated values and standards. So we are about to review these values through a Quranic lens. Surah Al-Asr is also addressing issues of societal depression. I want you to think about that. We know what individual depression is, but we might not be aware that there is even such a thing as societal depression. But in any case, Surah Al-Asr is addressing this very important issue of societal depression and what is necessary for rebounding from it. It is one of the most potent surahs in the Quran, lending help towards counseling individuals and groups of people. And again, we see counseling sometimes as being something that demands individual attention or something that can only be done individual to individual. But the Quran is actually giving us remedies for situations that involve the needed counseling that groups of people, even whole ethnic groups of people, need. And we're going to be paying special attention to the so-called African American situation when it comes to the need for group soul counseling. So keep that in mind also. The Quran is addressing human beginnings as well as the conclusions of things. It does so by speaking to every conceivable concept which has had a significant impact on a man's social development, especially those ideas that were claimed to have been authorized by God. So every important issue in every scripture is being addressed in the final scripture called Al-Quran. One of the connections in the Arabic word asr is to the English words author, A-U-T-H-O-R, and also authority, A-U-T-H-O-R-I-T-Y. It is also connected to what came to be the single most influential mythology, influencing mythologies and religions across the planet. And it is that of ASR, called Osiris by the Greeks, who was also depicted as a crucified sun, and that sun is to be spelled S-U-N. I want to start by giving you a quotation from Imam Warathuddin Muhammad, where he says, quote, God inspired humans to not only work for the present, but to work for the future. Man says, I have to prepare for the future, and if I can, help others to prepare for the future. This is what made prophets. The prophet nature is in every human being. Every human being is born with the prophet nature. We are the descendants of Adam, and Adam was not only the first man, he was the first prophet. He warned his children. He planned the life for the future. The need to prophesy grew stronger and stronger as man lived and experienced life in his environment. Trouble for that life produced more and more seers who were straining and straining to look into the future to know, where is this going and how can we prepare better for what we're going to face? It is common knowledge that the prophet nature is in all of us. We can never say that Muhammad is our messenger, but we always say that he is our prophet. He is our prophet. He is flesh of our flesh and bone of our bone. He is human like we are. So we begin with the first of 3 ayat or verses of this particular surah called Al-Asr. And it begins, Wal Asri. Translated into English, I swear by the squeezing of time. So I know you've heard the translation by the token of time, which is fine, although it's an antiquated kind of language. I don't know personally of anyone who speaks about time in terms of tokens. I've heard of token Negroes and tokens for the subway, and that's even antiquated now in New York City, at least. But it's a very rare, if at all, you're going to hear about time being spoken of as a token. And that's a difficult concept for us to fathom. So we're going to go right to the chase of that particular word, asr, and refer to it as a squeezing, a compressing, or a squeezing of time. This word asr is from a root word which means to squeeze. That word is usir. When you squeeze a fruit, you are attempting to get the essence out of it. When God puts the squeeze, so to speak, on humanity, it is for the purposes of extracting the essence or the essentials out of our nature. Our nature is one that God has created, condoned, and confirmed as being excellent. However, that excellence is only acceptable after the process of elimination has taken place. So learners, when all of the rind and all of the extraneous parts of the fruit that are unnecessary for the human system are dealt away with, we are then left with the essence of the fruit, which we call the juice of the fruit. The apple juice, once the apple is pressed, or the orange juice, once the oranges are squeezed, the lemon juice, etc., etc. We're left with the juice. And it's interesting to me, just as a connection in the phonemic, on the phonemic level of things, meaning how things sound. It's interesting that the 30th of the Quran that we're reading day by day, it's called the juice. Yeah, it's spelled J-U-Z, but it's called the juice. You know, so the Muslims are really the ones in the world with the juice. Yeah, it's not O.J. Simpson. It's the simple juice that the Quran gives. If we would just open up our minds and think or ponder. Let's continue. Yeah, I'm going to point out a few letters that are of essential value to the conversation. Those letters, and if you're not understanding Arabic or Arabic phonetics or Arabic pronunciations or transliterations and all of that big time stuff, don't worry about it. Just pay attention with your ears and you'll get it, inshallah. So the letter Ain we discussed, and that is coming from the back of the throat, as we mentioned, and allowing your throat to feel just a little bit strained. Ain, Ain, right? Now, when you connect Ain to a different letter called Saad, which is one of the S sounds, then it becomes Ain Saad. Ain Saad. Now, there are two other letters that produce the same phonemes, although they are different letters in the Arabic letter system, and they are Aleph, Sin. And I should double this I here so that you don't think we're trying to sell you on sin. Sometimes you'll see that with a double E, sometimes with a double I, but it's always pronounced a Sin. So Aleph is an A sound also, like Ain is an open A sound, and then Sin is the S sound, which is called a fricative, in the same way that Saad. So you have to hear almost a whistle coming from your lips when you pronounce these letters. Saad and Sin. Saad is a little softer than Sin. Ain is more challenging to the back of the throat than is the letter Aleph, but they both operate in the same way, and Ain Saad and Aleph Sin in and of itself, or of themselves, allude to the rising light and heat of a new day's sun. So I'm telling you something about the first two letters of the word Asr, which are Ain and Saad, but even when you see words that begin with Aleph and Sin, they're going to carry these same basic meanings. That's what needs to be understood. This is the science that's built into this letter system that eludes most people. Even people who teach the Arabic language are not necessarily familiar with this particular phenomenon, so pay attention. So we're talking about these two letters, which in English would just be AS, AS, that's all we're talking. And that AS has produced a word that we're all familiar with because it represents one of the continents on this planet called Asia. Asia. Why is it called Asia? Because Asia refers to the land of the rising sun. Why does Asia, you see the AS there? Why, and this is just a prefix, a suffix, pardon me, IA. Why does Asia mean the land of the rising sun? See, they don't just come up with these meanings out of thin air or whatever. They're not guessing. They're actually basing the meanings on what they used to know, at least, if they still don't know it, what they used to know to be the actual denotations of letters, meaning the actual frequency or inference that these letters carry. And they carried those meanings into the making or the formation of words. And that's all words, no matter where you find them on the planet, no matter what language you're speaking. Every single word that is spoken is connected to a frequency, or what they call in linguistics a phoneme. And that phoneme means something in the human psyche. Here's what a lot of linguists are missing. They think that language is arbitrary and that people just sat around the campfire thousands of years ago and decided to say, e, ba, ta, ba, and it was just indiscriminate. And then they just started pulling some of that indiscriminate stuff out of the sky and saying, well, if I say tab, let's make that the tub. And if I say, ha, ta, let's make that my hat. And they thought that these things were indiscriminate. This is what most scholars right now of language are teaching, and it's incorrect. Nothing that the human being speaks out of his or her mouth is indiscriminate or is pulled out of the sky and just happens to be agreed upon by other human beings in that area. No such thing. When you read Surah 55 called Ar-Rahman, the merciful benefactor, you read that particular surah, you're going to find in the very beginning of it that Allah speaks about the creation and formation of human language, the ability of the human being to articulate. That is being spoken of as something that Allah rewarded the human being with due to Allah's mercy on the human being. So language is not haphazard in the human being. Language is actually a gift from on high that allows the human being to articulate knowledge and communication in ways that no other creature that we know of is capable of doing.